Well, hello. Let's do currency recap. Joe with you here. It is Thursday, June 19th. Let's get into the markets. You guys know how this works. Make sure you take responsibility for the outcome. I want to take a look at the meaningful news of the day. Let's break down the markets when it comes to them technically. And if I've got trades to share, you guys know I'll do it.
All trades and analysis in this video are intended for professional traders only. This content does not constitute financial advice and is for educational purposes. This video is being released after a short delay due to Compliance Department review. Maverick members receive this content immediately as part of their daily trading resources. If you're ready to level up, consider joining Maverick Currencies. Our traders trade firm capital and keep 70 to 80% of profits. You bring the skill, we provide the backing. Let's get into today's market recap and see how the pros are trading the currency markets.
As we move into the market analysis, folks, there's really not much on the U.S. side as they were closed. So the U.S. equity market was closed for the Juneteenth holiday. Happy Juneteenth. I thought it was interesting. We had yesterday, we had an FOMC statement, and it was in line with expectations. We didn't have too much of a reaction to it. However, I did see a reaction when we had the minutes afterwards. We saw the markets drop, but they did come all the way back up and close flat. So I guess the biggest takeaway is going to be is what is anticipated more so than what is seen. That being said, let's just take a look at what the equities did outside of a U.S. closed market. So yen flat, dollar up a little bit, franc up, euro, pound up, CAD up, and the Aussie and the Kiwi down. This looks kind of like a risk-off move. But what was very interesting is, let's move to this next slide. So, of course, the SP, obviously, where it was yesterday. Crypto, 0.98%, gold, a little bit of a blip, and oil, a little bit of a surge to the upside. Now, that's a little discerning because it wasn't just crypto. Crypto was flat except for one. This is Bitcoin Cash. It was over 22% above its average volume and had a massive surge to the upside, 7.73%. I'll show you the chart here in a second. I don't really care why or how or whatnot, but it was pretty interesting to see. So we'll get there in a second. So let's finish up. Obviously, the market outlook hasn't changed. It's just a sideways day. The markets were closed here on the U.S. side. So you can see we don't have any sort of change when it comes to this high base and our +2 outlook. I'm still there. I still think it's cool. I still think it's a glass half full. The volume looks pretty decent. It's right above this basing area. We'll see what happens tomorrow and then over the weekend. Moving over to our economic news, you can see that these are the things that I've seen. U.S. Core retail sales showing a slowing consumer. Pretty good drop month over month. I believe their focus a little bit more is there. Unemployment claims were basically in line, showing that we got a steady employment, not a dropping employment. So we see a little bit more of the inflationary impact slowing when it comes to things like this. But we're also seeing some stability when it comes to employment levels. So could we be flattening? Well, we'll see. And I think that's kind of where the Fed sees it. So we kept them flat, but it's funny because this statement is what caused the most volatility. It reacted, it fell apart, and then, I didn't say they fall apart. The markets moved lower, but they moved back up and they closed flat. But we're getting a lot of, traders hanging on quote-unquote Fed speak. Outside of the U.S., we also have a whole bunch of economic data here. So take a look at this. We got the Kiwi. It's GDP, Q over Q, a little bit of an increase, but we have employment trends, a slight drop. Expectations of a 20.6K. It dropped 2.5. Not a huge miss, but the unemployment rate is in line. We've got the franc. We've got the pound. Monetary policies going across. I'm seeing a lot of things kind of settling in and just kind of not really exceeding or breaking above or below expectations. But there is just this unsettled outlook when it comes to policies and tariffs with the U.S. Let's get into our currency analysis, and you'll see that everything kind of stayed where it was, save obviously Bitcoin Cash. Let's get started with the yen. Now, folks, the yen it had a pretty good move to the upside. Looks like volatility was increasing and then it rolled over. A couple things that I saw with this that I don't like is it has this continuation when it comes to this downtrend. Now it looks like it might consolidate here. It might stabilize, maybe kind of a zero. We got the RSI that actually slipped a little bit lower. We got a flattening moving average. I didn't really want to get super negative on it because it could kind of stabilize at this area. However, taking into consideration the lower highs and the lower lows, and with the move below the RSI, I had to move it kind of to a -1, -2 outlook as far as volatility goes. The dollar pretty much flattened itself after the move that it had yesterday. And it was a pretty good surge. I mean, we broke above resistance levels, showing a little bit of strength. A pretty good pullback today. I expected that, especially after some of the Fed speak and knowing that the markets are actually closed. But we do have an RSI that's playing above that 50. So we'll see if that can consolidate. Now, it's a big point here, folks, if this can actually stay there. If it starts to falter down to this area. Now, I've got the U.S. as a +1 just because of the breakout above this and a couple of higher lows. But if it can't sustain this level where it's at now, then it could easily go back to kind of a zero area. But we'll have to see since the markets were closed today. Moving over to the franc. The franc kind of consolidated. It's showing a little bit of a surge that it had a few days ago, but it seems like it's kind of increasing a range to me. I don't really see anything that I can do with it. I mean, it was one of the stronger ones today as far as move-wise percentages, but it really didn't do much for itself. It bumped up and then it just kind of faded back. So I'm just going to keep this thing as a zero right now. Let's take a look at the euro and the pound. Well, I got the euro here, kind of a high base. It looks a little bit weaker because it's just been kind of consolidating in this area. However, I do not want to ignore the fact that it came off of a pretty good surge to the upside and is consolidating. Take a look at this RSI. It seems to try to stay above that 50. So I'm going to go a little bit half glass full on the euro here and give it a +1. I like its consolidation. It might pull back a little bit here, but that's fine. A move to the upside, I could see me turning it from a +1 to a +2. On to the pound. You can see the pound looks a little bit more of a bear rally. It seems like it slipped a little bit. I was thinking it was going to stay above this level here, and it didn't. It slipped and it set a lower low, but it did have a pretty decent bounce. Unfortunately, that bounce is more of a bear rally. You can see that the RSI kind of flipped here at the bottom, and it's just barely hanging above that 50. So I'm a little bit glass half empty right now on the pound, and I'm going to keep that at a -1 for today. Jumping over to the CAD. The CAD's been pretty much all over the place. It's got a pretty good range. It's been very reactive. It's pretty interesting how this can pull back and move and bounce, but it does tend to stay in some sort of area. So I've got an area here down to the downside too. If it breaks, I'm going to get pretty bearish the CAD. Right now, I am definitely -1 just because of the lower pivot. If it breaks this level here, I'm going to go -2, but this is kind of the area on the CAD where it's going to make or break for me. RSI is definitely rolling over right here at the 50, so I have to be kind of glass half empty for now. Let's move over to our risk on currencies. Here's the Aussie. Now, it seemed like it was doing pretty good. I like this kind of movement here. It slipped a little bit lower, but you can see it's kind of revisiting it. So I didn't really want to punish it too much. The RSI here is kind of sticking around that 50. If it could slide a little higher, flip-flop on the SAR here, a flattening moving average. If we can sustain this level here and have it a pivot, I could easily go back up to a +1, +2. Right now I have it as a 0, and the only reason is because this pullback is so deep, and this RSI actually crossed below that 50. So I'm going to keep the Aussie as a 0 for now. The Kiwi looks actually a little bit weaker, and a couple things that I see in it is this kind of dull moving lower highs. Now you can draw that, hey, we've got this support level. Yeah, this was slightly above it, but that's a pretty deep pullback. Another thing that kind of throws me off a little bit is the RSI has actually kind of spent more time in this area than it has in this area. So depending on how far this it's a bear rally for me right now, goes. If this goes up and sets an area and then starts to come back down, I'm cool keeping the Kiwi at -1, -2. I do have it at a -2, and I have to. The RSI is below. We got to turn on the moving average, and we broke a pretty substantial support level here a little while ago. So let's jump into the cryptos. Now, the expectations for a US market that's closed, I would expect this. This is kind of what I was looking for on all of them. So I've got, this is Bitcoin, flat, kind of descending here. I've got this at a -1. If this starts to fall, sure. I mean, we've got some worries about tariffs. We've got a Fed that's taking a look at the economy, and we've got all sorts of interesting things going on with the U.S. So based on the U.S. markets closed, I would expect these super risky currencies to basically just kind of go sideways, and that's kind of where it is. I'm going to jump to Ethereum again. Here's Ethereum. This is flat. By the way, I've got Bitcoin at a -1. Ethereum, I've got at a kind of a -2. I mean, you could go -1 as well. Why I went a little bit more bearish is because it does have this beautiful descending triangle pattern, a flat lining RSI below the 50, and this could easily break with any sort of weakness or worry to the downside. Let's take a look at Litecoin. Litecoin's very similar. I kept it at a -2. You could go -1. That's fine, folks. I'm just following my patterns. Descending triangle. Looking for it to break this area. I've got a flat lining RSI below 50. I got to get up -2 for that. Now, what was very interesting for today, I think it's kind of a fun topic, was Bitcoin Cash. This surge was very interesting. Like I say, 22% above average volume. It was a big push. It did break above resistance, right? We had a kind of a consolidation area right through here, ascending triangle if you guys want to play that game. Looks like it's a little extended. That's fine. I imagine after a surge here, based on over average volume, that it's going to at least hesitate or take a break at some sort of resistance level. Now, folks, I don't know why. So feel free to do the research to find out, hey, what was behind this? All I know is this was a selected crypto that broke above a resistance with U.S. markets closed. So here's my outlook. This is what we got velocity-wise. Now understand, the U.S. markets were closed, so I'd expect something a little bit more like this, maybe even something a little bit more towards the middle. But this outside move here on Bitcoin Cash is a little bit of a head-scratcher. We'll see what it does. I wouldn't really react to it. You guys can go ahead and go down the rabbit holes and try to figure out what's going on. It really just depends on if it can sustain. I do like the chart on it. In fact, when it comes to some of the trades that are doable, I think that's probably the best chart I've seen. Outside of that, folks, when it comes to possible trades, it's pretty much just the Bitcoin Cash that I like as it breaks above its velocity resistance, which you guys just saw. Outside of that, folks, I really didn't see anything that gave me any sort of advantage when it comes to pairing currencies. So the U.S. markets were closed today for the Juneteenth holiday. We had a strong move in the Bitcoin Cash. Let's keep an eye on that. Let's see what that does. Now, tomorrow the markets will reopen on the U.S. side. Let's see if we can't get a little bit more deeper in that. However, sometimes chasing that momentum can be a little bit risky. So just make sure if you're going to do it, you properly position size yourself to take advantage of that. Outside of that, guys, I didn't see any sort of move that really gave me something to make a trade on. I'm looking forward to see what happens, and thanks for joining me. Talk to you guys next time. Bye, everybody.